Alara grew up believing that every village carried a secret melody, and her little lakeside town in northern Italy was no exception. Each morning, she awoke to church bells that rang over terracotta rooftops, echoing stories too old to trace. Her days were spent inside her aunt's tiny bookshop by the stone bridge, where shelves bowed under the weight of faded poetry, love letters from strangers, and maps no one followed anymore. Tourists came and went, leaving behind stories, but Alara stayed, anchored by routine, though her heart quietly wished for something more. One warm spring morning, while arranging books for a new window display, a young man stumbled inside. Breathless, suitcase in hand, curls falling over his forehead as if carried by the wind itself. He apologized in a flurry of French and Italian, asking for directions. His name was Luca, half Italian, half French, and he was searching for his grandmother's old cottage where she once hummed a melody that had haunted him since childhood. Alara offered to guide him, partly out of kindness, partly out of curiosity about the strange boy whose violin case looked older than his passport. They walked together through cobbled streets painted with warm hues of history, past bakeries spilling the perfume of fresh brioche, past balconies draped in vines. When they reached the ivy-laced cottage, Luca paused, touching the peeling wooden door with reverence, as though greeting someone unseen. For a moment, he closed his eyes, waiting, listening. Alara watched him, intrigued by his quiet intensity. The next morning, he returned to the bookshop with a shy smile, asking if she could recommend stories about music. She handed him a worn poetry book, and instead of leaving, he opened his violin case and began to play softly between the shelves. The notes rose and spun gently around the shop like threads of sunlight, wrapping Alara's heart before she even realized she'd stopped breathing. Soon, Luca became part of her days. He played outside the shop each afternoon, drawing small crowds, children twirling, elderly couples holding hands, tourists filming with dreamy eyes. Alara helped him discover old sheet music forgotten in dusty corners of the shop. They spent evenings wandering the lake's quiet edge, where lanterns flickered on the water like drifting stars. He spoke of Paris, Vienna, and Prague, the cities he'd played in, but he always returned to the same story. His grandmother, who taught him a tune that felt like home. He confessed he'd heard it again in his dreams, calling him back to Italy, but he didn't know what he was meant to find. Alara's heart ached at the longing in his voice. As the weeks passed, laughter found them easily, over melting gelato shared in the sun, over spilled ink while writing postcards, over clumsy attempts at speaking each other's languages. Alara's world, once quiet and predictable, now thrummed with possibility. But shadows arrived when Luca received a letter, an early audition date for a Paris orchestra, one he had dreamed of since childhood. The village rejoiced for him, yet Alara felt her heart fold inward. One evening at the lake, Luca admitted he felt torn. Paris was a dream, but the dream felt strangely empty now. She wanted to tell him to stay, but fear held her tongue. Instead, she listened to him play his grandmother's melody, soft, aching, and unbearably beautiful. On his last night, the entire village lit candles, placing them on the lake. The waters glowed with floating lights like hundreds of souls drifting. Luca played the melody once more, and as the final note faded, he whispered that the song felt unfinished without her. Still, he left the next morning. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. No letters came. People whispered that he was surely a star in Paris. Alara tried to believe it. She tried to be happy for him. But every time she heard distant violin music, her heart cracked. Then, one crisp autumn morning, as she stood on the stone bridge, she heard his song, soft, trembling, familiar. She turned, breath caught, and there he was, suitcase at his feet, violin strapped to his back. His eyes carried the same longing, but now they held certainty. He walked to her slowly, every step a promise, and said he couldn't play in Paris because his music only made sense when she was listening. The bells rang, warm, jubilant, as Alara fell into his arms. The dream wasn't Paris. It was here, where two hearts found a new melody together, by a lake that remembered every note.